We have a brand new presentation today. This one is going to be a great one.
How you guys doing today? It's good to see. Good to see we had a lot of registrations for this event. I think we had something like 3,500 registrations. Is that right, Robbie?
I think so. So I'm going to start the poll so we can get a feel for who's in the room tonight. So there's going to be an option where you can vote on what type of diabetes you're living with. Maybe you don't have diabetes. Maybe a loved one does. Let us know in the poll so we can see who's in the room with us.
Absolutely. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's a beautiful July Thursday. Today's Thursday.
Yeah, it's Thursday. Hard to keep track.
Thursday. Okay, so also in the chat box, if you can tell us, where are you living? We want to see. We love to see. Generally, get a very international audience, so I'm always curious. So if you can type in the chat box, what city you live in, what country. Today we're giving out awards for people who come from Tanzania.
Yes,
that's the country of today.
That's what we're looking for today. The first comment is a woman from New Zealand. Love that.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Tampa, Florida. I went to high school in Sarasota. That's just right down the street there. Amazing. Clearwater, Florida. All right. Arizona, Miami, Ohio, Santa Rosa. Santa Rosa, you're in the Mecca there. There's a lot of amazing plant-based experts right in your neighborhood, whether that's Dr. Anthony Lim, True North, they have several physicians there. Great place. All right.
What else do you see in there?
I see Toronto, Vancouver Island, Canada. There's somebody in Calgary, Oregon, San Francisco, Houston, Texas, South Korea. Wow, Rita, South Korea. I don't know if I got the name right. Maybe everything's moving so quickly. Somebody is here from South Korea. Welcome.
That's exciting. I don't think I've ever seen that one before.
Yeah. Southeast UK, Oxford, UK, Australia, Seattle's in the house. I like that, Teresa. That's great. Oh, man. This is terrific. All right. Let's see how our poll is looking.
Yeah, what do we got so far?
59% with type 2 diabetes, 12% with pre-diabetes. We have 17% who don't have diabetes. And a small percent, we have 6% now with type 1.
6%. You know, I'm gonna put in a plug here for type 1 diabetes. I'm just gonna advocate on behalf of type 1. Robbie has type 1, I have type 1, and I love type 1. I just love type 1 diabetes. I love talking to people who have type 1 diabetes. I love learning more about type 1 diabetes. And what I've noticed actually is that over the course of time, there have been less and less people showing up to the webinars living with type 1 diabetes, which is interesting. Yeah. So I have a huge, I'm a huge fan of all the people with type 1 in the room. So thank you so much for showing up.
Yeah, great to have you here. We, everybody living with type 1, I mean, everybody living with diabetes in general, we sort of get each other. We kind of know what we're all going through, but in particular, type 1s, we all really kind of resonate with each other on a unspoken level to a certain extent of just what it's like and how great it feels to be in full control, quite frankly.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I remember the first day when I actually got full control over my blood glucose living with type 1 diabetes. It was like, it's just hard to explain just how cool it felt. You know, sure. Type 1 diabetes can be such a pain in the butt, but if you actually have a good, reasonable, evidence-based and sustainable way to eat, it's a game changer. So for those of you who have type 1 in the room, big shout out to you guys. Let's have some fun tonight.
Absolutely. We have 546 people in the room joining us. I love that. Love to see the enthusiasm on a warm Thursday in the summer here. Great to have you guys with us. You're really going to enjoy this presentation. This is a brand new PowerPoint presentation, a lot of new information that we have not talked about before, and you're going to really learn a lot tonight. So glad to have you with us.
Absolutely. So should we get into it?
Yeah, let's get started. So
Okay, perfect.
I will go ahead. I'll end the poll here and we'll get into our presentation.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen with you guys. I'm going to go here. I'm going to click on these fancy buttons. Can you see my screen right now?
It's going to be coming right now. Yes, we sure can. We see it.
Okay, fantastic. So today we're going to be talking about the ins and outs of your hemoglobin A1c. We're going to be talking about the science of your A1c, the actual biology of what the heck it is and why it's important. And then we're going to be talking about what are the advantages of using your A1c as a sort of diagnostic indicator. And then also some of the limitations of using your A1c as your sort of holy grail of living with diabetes. Your A1c is very, very important. And the truth is that most people have no idea what it actually is. So actually in the chat box right now, here's the question. I want to know, do you, in one sentence, can you explain what your A1c is? That's what I want to know. Okay, so let's just see what types of things roll in here because it's very, I'm very interested to see what you guys already do know about your A1c.
Okay, let's see what comes in here. We have another people sharing what type of diabetes they're living with. Terrific.
Okay, the question is, in one sentence, can you describe what your A1c actually measures? That's the question.
Okay, we got answers coming in here. It says average, it says 3-month average. Wow, they're just answers are flooding in. A snapshot of blood glucose level over a 3-month period. Average of blood sugar. 3-month average, 3-month blood sugar average. 3-month average of how much sugar is in the blood. 3-month average blood glucose. A lot of people talking about 3 months average blood glucose.
Okay. Okay, that's exactly what I was expecting to see, actually. My question, I guess I should have been a little bit more clear. I want to know if you understand the biology. Like, why 3 months? What's the whole point? So we're going to get into it in detail here, and hopefully you guys will be able to have a little bit more of a sort of like biochemistry understanding of your A1c, because I do believe it's actually fascinating. It's actually very important. So here's what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about what your A1c actually is and what it represents from a biological basis. We're going to talk about what your diet does to influence your A1c. Can your diet increase your A1c? Can your diet decrease your A1c? We'll also talk about exercise and how does that actually affect your A1c level. Then we'll talk about low carbohydrate diets, okay? Because there's something very important that happens when you eat a low carbohydrate diet, specifically with your A1c, that most people, even who eat a low carbohydrate diet, don't understand. So we're going to go into that in detail, and I want you guys to become world's experts on this particular subject. And then finally, we're going to talk about why your A1c is what we call an incomplete indicator of your diabetes health, because it's important, but it is not the holy grail of your diabetes health. And then lastly, but definitely not least, we're going to be talking about how you can reduce your A1c and gain insulin sensitivity at the same time. Okay, so we got a fun presentation today. Also, don't forget to stay to the end. At the end of tonight's presentation, we actually have a very important announcement that we would like to make, an extremely important announcement that we'd like to make. So please make sure that you're here to listen to the announcement and take advantage of the situation. Real quickly, I think a lot of you guys already know me at this point, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. My name is Cyrus Kambata. I have a PhD in nutritional biochemistry. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in the year 2002, so 16 years ago. I was going to Stanford at the time. I was studying mechanical engineering, and my life kind of came to a screeching halt because I had no energy. I was urinating all the time, and I just did not understand what was happening to me. So I checked myself into the doctor. They diagnosed me with type 1 diabetes overnight, and it fundamentally changed my entire life. For the first year of living with diabetes, I had no idea what to do. I just ate a low-ish carbohydrate diet, and it didn't work. I couldn't sleep at night. I developed anxiety. My blood glucose was all over the place. And I said, you know what, this is terrible. And I switched my diet. I became a low-fat, plant-based, whole food eater after 1 year of living with diabetes. Greatest single decision of my adult life. Period. End of story. Nothing is more intelligent than that one decision that I had made to switch over to a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet. The reason is because I gained tremendous amounts of insulin sensitivity. And we'll go into detail about what that actually means. But in short, I was able to eat a ton more carbohydrate-rich foods using less insulin. More carbohydrate, less insulin. And it was so dramatic for me that I decided to go back to school and study it at the PhD level. And that's why I studied nutritional biochemistry for 5 years. So here I am today, 15 years after changing my diet. I eat lots of carbohydrate on a daily basis, 500, 600, 700, sometimes 1,000 grams, depending on how active I am. I inject approximately 25 units of insulin per day. And my A1C is constantly hovering in the sort of non-diabetic or pre-diabetic range, which is actually pretty challenging to do, but it's possible if you have a solid plan that you are consistent with. So that's me in a nutshell, and now I'll turn it over to Robbie.
Perfect. We have a comment in the chat box I think you'll agree with, Cyrus. Kylie was a great decision in your adult life.
Oh, my Lord. Kylie, she's sitting right here. That is. So low-fat, plant-based whole foods was the second best decision of my adult life. I love you, baby.
Okay, so I'm sure you guys know me by now as well, so we'll go through a quick intro. My name is Robbie Barbero, and I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, just like Cyrus, over 18 years ago. And I, over the years, tried many different diets, trying to get things under control, trying to optimize my health, how I felt, my energy. I had terrible acne, I had plantar fasciitis, taken allergy medications year-round, just not feeling my best. So I started reading a lot of books, tried a lot of things, whether it was the Weston A. Price Foundation diet, which is high in animal products, low in carbohydrates, whether it was a Gabriel Cousens style, vegan, low-fat, plant-based lifestyle. What ended up working for me was what we teach here, and I've been doing it now for over 11 years. It's a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet. You can see in this picture, I get to eat plates and plates of figs, mangoes, papaya, all the fruit I want. I love greens, I love salads, and this food tastes amazing because my taste buds have come alive. So I'm really passionate about sharing this information. Cyrus and I have teamed up now doing Mastering Diabetes for over a year and a half now and just having a lot of fun. So really glad to have you joining us tonight. And I think you're going to really enjoy the presentation.
All right, so let's get into the meat and potatoes of this presentation here. So here's the first question. What the heck is your A1C, and what does your A1C actually represent? Okay, let's get into it. Hemoglobin. Okay, this is where you get to put your science hat on. Let's travel back to biology class in your, sophomore year of high school, okay, where you were falling asleep or maybe you were writing some notes to your friends, okay? Hemoglobin, hemoglobin, hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is this molecule that floats in your blood. It is actually inside of red blood vessels, okay? And there are trillions of red blood vessels that are floating through your cardiovascular system. And these red blood vessels, their main role in life is to trap oxygen and deliver oxygen to tissues. So when you take a deep breath in, when you do this, when you go, what you're doing is you're inhaling oxygen from the outside world. You're inhaling nitrogen mainly, but some oxygen comes in as well. That air goes into your lungs. And in your lungs, you have these things called alveoli. And alveoli are responsible for taking the oxygen in particular from that breath of air and transferring it into your blood. And as soon as it gets into your blood, that oxygen has to be trapped by something. And that's where hemoglobin comes into play. So hemoglobin is inside of these red blood cells. And as soon as oxygen becomes available, the hemoglobin traps it and it holds on to it. And then as those red blood cells circulate all throughout your body, they move from your lungs, maybe they go to your heart, maybe they go to your muscle, maybe they go to your liver, your pancreas, your spleen, your brain, your thyroid gland, anywhere in your body where oxygen delivery is needed, hemoglobin will release the oxygen and allow that oxygen to go into that tissue so that tissue can then use that oxygen for what's called respiration, which is a fancy way, super nerd way of saying to be able to perform reactions, oxidative reactions. So a red blood cell starts out by trapping oxygen in your lungs, using hemoglobin, and then it circulates all throughout your cardiovascular system. And then at the time that it's supposed to release, oxygen is released and it gets transferred to cells that need it in order to produce energy. Okay? Now, what the heck does this have to do with your A1c? Why in heaven's name are we talking about oxygen in the first place and red blood cells? Because that has nothing to do with glucose. Okay? Well, it turns out, take a look at this cool cartoon that I found online earlier today. This is sort of a description of exactly what happens, why your hemoglobin A1c is used as a marker of your blood glucose control. Okay? What happens is that hemoglobin in circulation, there's a lot of it in circulation, and hemoglobin tends to stick to glucose. So researchers found this out a long time ago, and they noticed that in normal people, okay, non-diabetic people, a certain proportion of all the hemoglobin that was floating in their bloodstream had glucose molecules attached to it. And they thought, oh, that's weird, because hemoglobin is not supposed to trap glucose. It's supposed to trap only oxygen. But it turns out that glucose can stick to hemoglobin just naturally because of its chemical composition. And then they found out that people who are actually diabetic, or people who have higher blood glucose, have more glucose attached to those hemoglobin molecules. And so they said, wait a second, what if we were to use the amount of glucose attached to hemoglobin as a way of determining whether or not your blood glucose is actually elevated or not? So as you can see here in this diagram, right, these red blood cells are what's called freely permeable to glucose, which means that glucose that's floating in your blood can get right into the red blood cell. And as soon as it does, it basically attaches to hemoglobin. And then as soon as it attaches to hemoglobin, that's it. It can't unattach to hemoglobin, okay? So it's basically permanently bound or covalently bound. And what that means is that in order to get this glucose to detach from hemoglobin, the hemoglobin has to die, okay? So hemoglobin lasts in your blood and is alive in your blood for, guess how long? 3 months. That's the answer, okay? So everybody wrote in the chat box, they said your A1c is a 3-month marker of your blood glucose control. Why 3 months? The reason is this: hemoglobin is only alive for 3 months. Okay? As soon as one hemoglobin molecule dies, another hemoglobin molecule is made in its place. And so there's this constant recycling program which is happening. So if a hemoglobin molecule happens to get glucose attached to it, then that glucose stays for the rest of its life, and then approximately 3 months after it was born, it dies and a new one is made in its place. So hopefully this is making a lot of sense, okay? The more glucose you have in circulation, the higher your A1c is gonna be. So it turns out that if you take a look at this scale right here, your A1c is basically used as a diagnostic marker. So that means that when you go to the doctor and you get your A1c measured, your doctor is trying to determine whether you have a normal amount of glycosylated hemoglobin or whether the amount of glycosylated hemoglobin has gone up over time, which is an indicator that you may have diabetes. So normal people, okay, the cutoff for a quote unquote normal non-diabetic person is right here at 5.6. So if you have 5.6% of all the hemoglobin in circulation or less, anywhere in this zone right here, okay, then you're considered non-diabetic. Now, if between 5.7 and 6.4% of the hemoglobin in your circulation is glycosylated, that means that you have pre-diabetes. And then if 6.5% or more of the hemoglobin in circulation has glucose molecules attached to it, then that's an indicator that you actually have type 2 diabetes, okay? So all we're looking at here is of the proportion of total hemoglobin floating in your blood, how much of it has glucose attached to it, okay? So here it says approximately 5 to 5.6% of hemoglobin molecules are normally glycosylated in healthy humans or non-diabetic humans. So I just drew this picture here This right here, this is your bloodstream, obviously, and these hemoglobin molecules are inside of these red blood cells inside of your blood, okay? So I just drew a lot of hemoglobin right here. And let's just say, for the sake of argument here, that this one blue glucose molecule that has covalently attached to this hemoglobin molecule right here, that this right here represents between 5 and 5.6% of all the hemoglobin that has glucose attached to it. So this is what you would consider normal. Now, if between 5.7 and 6.4% of hemoglobin has glycosylation or has glucose attached to it, then that means you're pre-diabetic. So we're not talking about a lot, okay? We're talking about just a little bit more of hemoglobin that has glucose attached to it. And then by the time you develop type 2 diabetes, now we're looking at approximately 6.5% or more of the hemoglobin in circulation that now has glucose attached to it. So what I want you guys to understand visually is that we're talking about not that much more glucose attached. It's a very, very finely tuned system. Okay, it's not like in one situation it's 2%, and then if you have diabetes, it's 35%. Okay, that's a much bigger range. We're talking about fractions of a percent that make a difference. And so that's why it's very important to make sure that the red blood cells in your body are not overly glycosylated, because that can result in a whole host of problems down the road. Okay, so that's the biology. That's what's the actual, biochemical interpretation of what your A1c actually is. Now the next question is, well, how does your diet actually affect your A1c? Okay, so you have a lot of tools at your disposal for manipulating your A1c value to your advantage. One tool that you have is to eat a certain way, or to use your diet as your control mechanism. Another thing you can do is use exercise. Another thing you can do is fast. Another thing you can do is change the macronutrient composition of the food you're eating to be a very particular makeup. Okay, you can change the amount of food that you're eating. You can do a whole bunch of things to try and manipulate your A1c to your advantage, but not all of them are created equal. Okay, so in this situation, let's take a look at this red line. Okay, if you're living with some version of blood glucose instability or any version of diabetes, chances are you've seen a red line that looks something like this. Maybe you eat a meal right down here, and then within 60 minutes, your blood glucose has doubled. Okay, so now it's close to 200, and then maybe it starts to come down, and then maybe it does this whole pattern, and before you know it, you look at this and you're like, that's not normal. Why is this happening to me? Okay. As you become better and better at controlling your blood glucose, you can turn this red line into this green line right here, and you can get better blood glucose control such that when you eat a meal, your blood glucose doesn't, excuse me, I almost had to sneeze there. Your blood glucose doesn't vary as much. Okay, so the green represents better blood glucose control. What I want you guys to understand is that the food that you put in your mouth is without question the #1 most important variable that you have at your disposal for controlling your A1c level. Okay, regardless of whether you think that going to do more exercise is going to benefit you, or whether you think eating less food is going to benefit you, or doing more fasting, all of those things will manipulate your A1c, but the composition of your diet is without question the most powerful tool that you have at your disposal. Okay? So over the course of time, this red line, if this thing continues, and this happens maybe for breakfast, and then for lunch, and then maybe for dinner, and then it happens next week and the week after that, this is going to lead to a high A1c value, because there's more glucose floating in your blood, and therefore there's more glucose that can attach to hemoglobin. But if you instead have this green line, then that means that your A1c is going to be much lower. It's going to be more close to what's considered non-diabetic or normal, simply because there's less excess glucose floating in your blood. So if you eat a diet that contains primarily low fat and low protein foods, so they're high in carbohydrate or higher in carbohydrate, they're lower in fat and lower in protein. Okay, and these foods include things like fruits, vegetables, legumes, which are beans, lentils, and peas, and then whole grains. Then what ends up happening is, you might have seen this in previous webinars, where your liver and muscle tissue end up storing more blue and less yellow, okay? More glucose and less fatty acids, because there's more glucose available inside of these foods and there's less fatty acids available, and therefore your tissues respond by increasing the amount of glucose that they use as a fuel and increasing as much, or increasing more storage as well, okay? So the key to understanding this picture is that these foods are low in fat and these foods are low in protein. And if you do that, then you're going to end up with this picture right here. I can take a snapshot in time and try and look at what fuel storage your liver has, and you'll see that your liver is storing predominantly glucose and a small amount of fatty acid, and your muscles doing the exact same thing. Now, if instead you ate a diet that was high in fat and high in protein, then you would be eating foods like this: red meat, white meat, fish, dairy, eggs, okay? All of these foods are high in fat and high in protein. So as a result of doing that, because these foods contain more fatty acids, more yellow and less blue, then the tissues are going to shift, and the tissues are basically going to try and utilize more fat for energy and less glucose for energy. So they're going to try and burn more fat. They're also going to try and store more fat. And that's, you'll end up with this picture right here, where you have more yellow and less blue. And again, the key to this is that these foods are high in fat and high in protein. When you eat a diet that's high in fat and high in protein, we're going to see what results. Okay? So on the left-hand side, we have insulin-sensitive tissues. Okay? So these are tissues that are using glucose as their primary fuel. Okay? Lots of blue, small amounts of yellow. And then over here on the right-hand side, we have tissues that are insulin-resistant. And these insulin-resistant tissues have more fat stored and less glucose. So I'm going to pause here for a second. And here's the question. I just told you that the food that you eat will determine what these two tissues look like. Here there's more blue, here there's more yellow. Okay, and now I'm telling you that these tissues that store more yellow are more insulin resistant. The question for you is this, and I want the answer in the chat box. What is insulin resistance? I want a one-sentence description of what insulin resistance is. Okay? If you had to complete a sentence, insulin resistance is blank, what would you say? I want to know your answers. Robbie, tell me what you see.
Okay, let's see what's going to come in. You know, what's funny, if anybody watched the new testimonial video that we released today, they would learn how Mike was a star student. So let's see what comes in. Somebody says, too much glucose storage, too much fat in tissues, storage of fat in cells not designed to store fat, storing fat.
Who said that?
Tissues. You know, actually, a lot of people said that. I only read a select answers because there's just so many strolling in.
Fair
enough. So inability of insulin to use. Oh man, it's very difficult to read. It's great though. I love this enthusiasm. We have over 763 people in the room right now, and you guys participating is very important. That's how you learn. So we have a lot of answers coming in. Ineffective use of insulin by cells. Insulin resistance is fat and tissues not designed to store fat. I see a lot of good answers.
Okay, so I'm going to stop at that last one right there, which I think a lot of you guys wrote, which is insulin resistance is caused by the storage of excess fat in tissues that are not designed to store fat. You guys nailed it, okay? What we're talking about here is the storage of excess fat, okay? Excess yellow in tissues that are not designed to store fat. Your liver and your muscle were never designed to store large amounts of fat. That is not how they're biochemically designed. They're designed to store large amounts of glucose and small amounts of fat. So they're actually supposed to look like this. And this is how you actually maximize your longevity and decrease your chronic disease risk. But when they move from this composition to this composition, then you develop insulin resistance, and this increases your risk for many chronic diseases. So for all of you that said that, give yourself a high five. You crushed it. Okay. So if you eat these foods on the left, fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains, you end up with more insulin-sensitive tissues. You eat meat, chicken, fish, dairy, eggs, you end up with more insulin-resistant tissue. Now, when you become insulin-sensitive, it's very straightforward to be able to get your A1c value to between 5 and 6%. And you can achieve this A1C of 5 to 6% while eating carbohydrate-rich foods. And it turns out that these carbohydrate-rich foods, which I pictured here, have a very high nutrient density. And when I say high nutrient density, I mean high micronutrient density. They got lots of vitamins, lots of minerals, lots of fiber, lots of water, lots of phytochemicals, and lots of antioxidants. So these types of foods are what are called nutrient-dense foods because they have a lot of micronutrients in them. And by eating these foods, you're able to eat not only foods that contain a lot of carbohydrate, but you're able to keep your A1C to within 5, 6.0. And that's excellent work if you're living with some form of diabetes. Because again, we're trying to move our A1C into the non-diabetic range or close to the non-diabetic range. And this right here is exactly what we see from hundreds, if not thousands of people that employ this approach in our coaching program. Now, if instead you eat the foods that are pictured here on the right, you can achieve an A1C that's even lower. Look at this. Your A1C can go as low as 4%. And it's very, very common to see people on the internet or people who are eating low carbohydrate diets, especially ketogenic diets, report that their A1C is like a 4.2 or a 4.6 or a 4.7. Okay, but here's the difference. Okay, you can achieve these very low non-diabetic A1Cs. However, you cannot eat carbohydrate-rich foods. You cannot eat carbohydrate-rich foods. And I say cannot not because they're not allowed. It's because the minute you eat carbohydrate-rich foods, your blood glucose goes through the roof. And the reason for this is because, like I talked about, these foods cause insulin resistance. So yes, you're able to drop your A1C to a nice low value simply because you're avoiding carbohydrate-rich anything. And by doing that, you actually develop more insulin resistance. You just never know that you're living with insulin resistance because there's no carbohydrate to challenge your glucose metabolism. So people who are eating these low carbohydrate and ketogenic diets, they actually don't know that they're actually living with a high amount of insulin resistance, which is increasing their risk for chronic disease. It's not their fault. But their A1C is low, but their insulin resistance is high. And that's a huge problem. So if we look at it another way, insulin sensitive tissues look like this, more blue, less yellow, and you can achieve a A1C of between 5 and 6.0. And this right here is excellent, excellent work. This is the only thing that's actually physiologically necessary. It's not actually required to get your A1C to less than 5.0 because, again, even in non-diabetic individuals, it's not that low. If you eat insulin resistance causing foods, then you end up with more yellow and less blue. You develop more insulin resistance, even though your A1C is nice and low. So this is why people get confused because they say, what are you talking about? My A1C is a 5.1. It's a 4.6. It's better than your A1C, right? But what I'm saying is that that's not enough because you have a low A1C, but you're living with a lot of insulin resistance. Now, why is insulin resistance a problem? Okay, here's why. Because insulin resistance is a central node. And what that means is that when you increase your level of insulin resistance and you increase your risk for insulin resistance, you also increase your risk for a whole host of chronic diseases, which you see here. This is not all of them. I just picked out the ones that are most common. So that includes things like, all the forms of diabetes that are listed here. You increase your risk for cancer, for coronary artery disease, which can lead to a heart attack, for hypertension and atherosclerosis, which can lead to strokes down the road, for obesity, for high cholesterol, for fatty liver. More insulin resistance results in increased difficulty dealing with PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. We're going to be writing an article about this very soon. Did you know that if you increase your level of insulin resistance, you're also at risk for Alzheimer's disease? Okay, there's some really fascinating research which is coming out now showing that Alzheimer's patients are generally insulin resistant. You increase your risk for neuropathy, for blindness, for kidney failure, for retinopathy. This is what happens to your eyes. This is why it becomes very difficult to see, and for erectile dysfunction. Okay, so all of these are very real conditions. And the more insulin resistance you have, the more your risk for all of these, what I call satellite complications. Okay, So again, take-home message of today's webinar: low carbohydrate diets reduce your A1C, but they make you more insulin resistant, and that is going to lead you in the wrong direction over time. So here's what happens to people in the low carbohydrate world. Again, this is not their fault because they're unaware that this is happening, but this is the truth. You hear statements like this: look, my A1C is super low, it's a 4.7. My glucose has never been lower, never been more controllable. Look, my glucose doesn't budge, it's between 80 and 90 all day long. Okay, they get super excited, just like this dude right here. Okay, they're super excited because their glucose is controllable. All they have to do is avoid eating fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. If they can do that, boom, no problem. So you'll see people say, oh, look, this was my blood glucose profile before I adopted a ketogenic or low carbohydrate diet. And now that I'm eating a ketogenic diet, boom, look at this, flatline, no problem controlling your blood glucose. My question to you is this: is this good enough? Is this good enough? Okay? The answer is no, because they make you more insulin resistant. Okay? Now, in the long term, here's what can happen to you if you are living with insulin resistance over the course of time. You can end up with an increased risk for heart disease. Okay? So this is sort of a text version of that picture I previously showed you. All types of cardiovascular conditions can result. Glucose metabolism disorders can result. Okay? You can end up with fatty liver. That's a huge problem for a lot of people living with type 2 diabetes. Okay, it significantly increases total body inflammation, and over the course of time, you can end up gaining weight or not being able to lose weight. You can end up dropping your energy levels, having very difficult GI function or GI dysfunction. Okay, and you can end up with very intense food cravings. So in the chat box, here's what I want to know from you guys. If you are currently eating a low carbohydrate diet, or if you have eaten a low carbohydrate diet in the past, what types of side effects did you experience? Because I know the side effects that I experienced, and I remember they were terrible. I did not like any of them. But I want to know from you guys, if you've eaten a low carbohydrate diet or if you're currently doing it right now, what type of side effects have you experienced?
Okay, so the first answer we have coming in was food cravings. And then we have Mandy experiencing a foggy brain. Deb had muscle cramping. Food cravings from Christina. Patricia was put on 3 meds. And now they're starting to just flood in here. Colon cancer, energy fluctuations. Diabetes got worse. Heart arrhythmia. Didn't lose weight. Trouble sleeping. Constipation. Irritability. Cholesterol shot up. Low energy, brain fog, mood swings, low energy.
Yep. You're hitting them all on the head. Every single one of the ones that you just described are common side effects of low carbohydrate diets. Yep. Okay, that's really good news. Sorry, that's not what I meant to say. It's not good news that you experienced that, but it's good news that you guys are now educated about the fact that a low carbohydrate diet can actually be the cause of all that. But here's the best part: you can reverse it. Okay, you can reverse it using low-fat, plant-based whole food nutrition. Chris Hertel, absolutely love this guy. You guys, those of you who are in our coaching program have probably interacted with him. He's in our Facebook group. He's very active. He's been on a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet for 11 months. Yesterday, he posted an update. He's lost 76 pounds in 11 months. I had no idea that he lost that much weight. 76 pounds. His fasting blood glucose has been cut in half. His A1C went from the just over, just in the type 2 diabetes range, okay, all the way down to 5.2. So let me back up here. Chris has type 1 diabetes. He's like me. He's like Robbie, okay? He has type 1 diabetes. He also has rheumatoid arthritis. He was also put on a whole host of blood pressure medications and cholesterol medications and anti-inflammatory medications. He was taking 12 medications, and this is what he looked like before. Now, even though he has type 1 diabetes, his blood glucose control was, I would say, was relatively good because it was at 6.5. But now that he's eating like a champ, he's dropped his A1C to the low 5s, which is, I'll be honest with you, it's better than my A1C, better than Robbie's A1C, and he's killing it. He's doing a great job. And now his basal insulin and his bolus insulin has gone down significantly, okay? He just posted this picture yesterday. This is his A1C right here. It's at a 5.2 with an estimated average glucose of 103. Here's the best part. Chris eliminated 12 oral medications. He eliminated 12 oral medications and is now only on insulin because he has to be for the rest of his life. This is the power of plants. Okay, so here's the second question. How does exercise affect your A1C level? Because I told you earlier that you can manipulate your A1C to your advantage using a number of different variables. Exercise is the second most important of all. So here's one of the most important things that you can learn about how exercise affects your blood glucose. Okay, over here I have pictured your muscle, your liver, and your blood vessels. Now, when you exercise, tissues, namely your muscle and your liver, are able to take up glucose for free. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that they're able to take up glucose without the use of insulin, and that's a big deal, okay? Under normal circumstances, all tissues require insulin in order to use glucose. With the exception of your brain, that's the only one that can use glucose for free. Your muscle requires insulin, your liver requires insulin, your pancreas requires insulin, your gallbladder requires insulin, your kidney, your lung tissue, et cetera, et cetera. All of these tissues require insulin to use glucose. But in this situation, when you exercise, you can actually put glucose into these tissues without a single drop of insulin. Well, how does that work? Okay, so when you're exercising, your muscle sends out a signal and it says, hey, I need glucose. I need lots of it because I'm being used right now. I'm expanding, contracting, expanding, contracting, expanding, contracting. I'm doing a lot of work. Give me fuel. And your liver also says, yes, I need glucose as well, because your liver is responsible for giving glucose to your muscles and giving glucose to actively working muscles. So glucose is going into your muscle and it's being burned quickly. Your liver is giving up glucose and therefore it needs to be replenished. So what ends up happening is that both of these tissues say, I need glucose, I need glucose. And so the glucose that's present in your blood gets a free ride into both of these tissues. So the glucose that's already present in circulation, that's floating in your blood, goes, oh, hey, look, I can get into the muscle for free. And then it does. And then it says, oh, hey, look, I can get into your liver for free. And then it does. So this is what's called insulin-independent glucose uptake. And this is something that happens during exercise and something that happens after exercise as well for a short window of time. Now, when you are done performing exercise and you're in the resting state, okay, true, you can still take up small amounts of glucose for free in your muscle and in your liver. But what ends up happening in this state, when you're done, when you're resting, is that both of these tissues require insulin. They just require a fraction of what they used to require before exercise. So this is insulin pictured here in green. I showed you one molecule of insulin for your muscle and one molecule of insulin for your liver. That's an exaggeration. What I'm trying to say is that you don't need very much. So a small amount of insulin is necessary for your muscle and for your liver to be able to take glucose up. So what insulin says is insulin goes, hey, muscle, knock, knock. I got some glucose in the blood. Do you want to take it up? And it goes to your liver. Hey, liver, knock, knock. I got some glucose in the blood. Do you want to take it up? Both of these tissues say, oh, heck yeah. I definitely want this stuff because I'm still hungry. I'm still hungry because you just went and did that class. You just went and swam, you ran, you did a hike, okay? You did jazzercise, maybe you did a CrossFit class, maybe you went juggled a soccer ball outside. Doesn't really matter, but these tissues are hungry. So the glucose that's in your blood is able to get inside of these tissues using only a small amount of insulin, okay? Before exercise, you would have needed maybe 50% to 100% as much insulin. I'm sorry, you would have needed 50 to 100% more. So insulin has basically sensitized you to insulin. I'm sorry, exercise has sensitized you to insulin in the sense that only a small amount is necessary to get this glucose right here into tissues. So what exercise does is it reduces your A1c value because, number one, it allows glucose to get into tissues without the use of insulin, and that drops the amount of glucose in your blood, which is a good thing because that drops the amount of hemoglobin, which is going to get exposed to insulin. Number two, exercise makes insulin more powerful when you're resting, just like we talked about, okay? And number three, exercise reduces your blood glucose both during and after exercise, which means that overall, hemoglobin, no matter where it lives, is less exposed to glucose, and that's a good thing. So as you adopt a regular exercise regimen, your A1c value is likely to start out, let's say it started out as a 6.3. The more you exercise, the more you can drop your A1c value closer and closer and closer to this non-diabetic range where we're trying to end up. Now, it's important to understand a couple of things. Number one, consistent movement is the second most powerful insulin sensitizer after your diet, okay? It is not necessary to move your body at a high intensity. All we're asking you to do is move your body approximately 6 days per week for approximately 30 minutes per day, okay? This is consistency. So this is a total of about 180 minutes of exercise for the week. I did not say perform 1 hour on Sunday and 1 hour on Wednesday and then sit on your butt the rest of the time. No. I'm saying do 30 minutes of exercise at the minimum every single day and take 1 day off. If you do this, you're consistent, and that's how you get a net reduction in your A1c. And like I said earlier, you do not need to exercise at a high intensity. There's this common misconception that because high intensity interval training actually does work and that it can make significant performance improvements in a short period of time, that the only way to exercise is by going out and just killing yourself, okay? I can tell you with a lot of confidence, it is not necessary to go out and do sprints. You do not need to go out and join CrossFit. You don't need to do any of that. All you need to do is move your body and get your heart rate elevated. And if you can get your heart rate elevated for approximately 30 minutes per day, 6 days a week, that right there is going to drop your A1c significantly. Okay, so here's how you can do this. Simply split your exercise. My recommendation here on the exercise front would be choose 3 of those days and do cardiovascular-based movements. Running, hiking, biking, swimming, jogging, Tae Bo, Zumba, okay? Any of these movements which just get your heart rate elevated. That's really, really, really good stuff for your blood vessels, for your liver, and for your muscles. The other 3 days, I would try and focus on doing some type of resistance movement, which is things like, body weight resistance training. It could be weightlifting. It could be P90X. It could be CrossFit. It could be anything that involves things like squats and push-ups and sit-ups, okay, where you're moving your body against the resistance of gravity. That's how you can split up your movement patterns between cardiovascular and resistance movement. And when you do it this way, you can maximize your insulin sensitivity very easily. Okay, here's a perfect example. Lindsay. I love this girl. We've been working with Lindsay now for probably close to 2 years at this point. She started out, she has type 1 diabetes, similar to Chris Hertel. Her A1c started out at a 7.2. Her A1c is currently, I think it's even lower than a 5.8 if I'm not mistaken. But last time we checked, it was a 5.8. Her insulin use came down by 33%. She lost 17 pounds, and her cholesterol level came down by, approximately 1/3. Okay, she did this by eating a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, as you can see right here, and exercise. This girl lives to exercise. Okay, she runs, she does yoga, she also does CrossFit. She does some combination throughout the week of all those 3 different types of exercise. She's super active. She loves being active, and I love talking with her about that because I'm also addicted to exercise. So she uses her diet and exercise as her 2 most powerful weapons. And as a result of that, look at her A1c. She's doing a fantastic job, and my hat goes off to her. Okay? Last thing here. Your A1c is an incomplete indicator of your diabetes health. Well, what the heck do I mean by that? Okay? Most people who are living with diabetes throw all of their eggs into the A1c basket. Okay? It's like if you're a poker player and you go all in on a hand and you're like, you know what, I'm going to give all my chips in because I believe so confidently in my hand, okay? Your A1C is important, but your A1C is not that important. Your A1C can only truly be interpreted in the context of a whole host of biomarkers in order to determine your total body health. It's just one indicator of your blood glucose average, and it is not the end-all and be-all of your diabetes health. However, most people and most physicians believe that your A1C is the end-all and be-all of your diabetes health. So again, here's Jonathan, same dude I showed you earlier, okay? He has got a great A1C, it's at 4.7. His blood glucose has never been lower in his life, and his blood glucose is between 80 and 90 all day long. Let's do a quick case study on Jonathan, because even though his blood glucose control is excellent, there's something fishy about his health, and we're going to try and figure out what it is. Okay? So Jonathan had lab tests taken in April, and he had lab tests taken in July. So that's 3 months separated. In April, his A1C was an 8.4%. So as we've talked about, that's way elevated. So as a result of that, he was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and he was told to adopt some diet and some exercise regimen to drop that number. 3 months later, he comes back, he checks his A1C, it's a 5.3%. He's happy. Next thing, his body weight. He started out at 189 pounds, he's now at 163 pounds. He lost 26 pounds in 3 months. No wonder he's got such a big smile on his face. He's a happy, happy camper. Okay? His BMI, his body mass index. A healthy individual has a body mass index between 20 and 25. Anything beyond 25 indicates being either overweight or obese, and anything between 20 and 25 indicates being healthy. So he started out in the overweight category, and then 3 months later, he's now right smack dab in the middle of the happy zone. So his A1C improved, he lost 26 pounds, and his BMI went from being overweight to normal. So things are looking awesome for Jonathan right now. Here's the question. Is Jonathan insulin sensitive? In the chat box, I want you guys to write whether or not Jonathan is insulin sensitive, okay? If we don't know the answer to that question, tell me why we don't know the answer to that question. Go.
Okay, let's see what comes in. So the question is, so Gina says nope. Leticia says yes. Beth says no. Kathy says who knows. Bonnie says no. Bruce says yes, he is. Sharon says no. Stephanie says no. Anne says he's insulin resistant. Rose says no, he is not insulin sensitive. Hope says we don't know yet. Peter says I don't know. Anne says no. Barbara says most definitely. We got answers all over the place, Cyrus.
Answers all over the place. Okay. So if you said yes, Jonathan is insulin sensitive, that's a good guess, but the answer is we don't have enough information. That is the right answer, okay? So for those of you who said we don't know, I don't have enough information, he could be insulin sensitive, he could be insulin resistant, okay? It's a giant question mark. Give yourself a high five because we don't have enough information. The information that we're looking at right here is basically indicating to us that things are moving in the right direction. He's got a lower A1C, he lost 26 pounds, and his improved his BMI. So this is all good, 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 okay? This is what happens. You go to the doctor's office, and your doctor looks at this, and your doctor's like, hey, things are looking good for you. High five. Whatever you're doing, just keep it up. You're doing a great job, right? The problem is that it's not that your doctor's wrong. It's not that your doctor's a bad person. Not at all. The doctor is trying to help you out as much as possible. It's that we don't have enough information because we're not measuring the right things. We're not measuring enough biomarkers to actually know whether or not you're insulin sensitive. Okay? So what do we need to measure in order to actually determine whether or not Jonathan is insulin sensitive? That's the question. Okay? So what we developed, actually, what Kylie developed, because she's so smart, she's so brilliant, she's been a nurse for 18 years, she came up with the insulin resistance checklist. And the insulin resistance checklist is actually an article that we published, I believe, last week or the week before. And the insulin resistance checklist is basically a collection of biomarkers that you can track over the course of time in order to determine if you're actually insulin sensitive. I would love for there to be one thing that you could measure that would say, yep, you're insulin sensitive, but it's not that simple because it's a complicated concept. So the things that you need to measure are using this acronym PILAF, okay? So just think rice pilaf, P-I-L-A-F, right here. The first one's pressure, for your blood pressure, okay? We do not know Jonathan's blood pressure. Without knowing his blood pressure, we cannot determine whether or not he's insulin sensitive. I stands for ideal body weight, okay? We can calculate his ideal body weight. He is actually at his ideal body weight, so he's doing a great job. We know the answer to this question. His lipid panel, okay, his cholesterol, his LDL, his HDL, his triglycerides, we don't know that information. He could have incredibly high cholesterol or he could have good cholesterol. We don't know. That's why I said unknown here. His A1c, we know the answer, and his fasting blood glucose, we know the answer. Okay, so we know 3 out of the 5 of these things, but these 2 unknowns are so important that if we don't know them, then we cannot conclude anything about his insulin sensitivity. Another thing that we don't actually know in this situation is we don't know the composition of his diet. We don't know if he's eating low-fat, plant-based whole foods or whether he's eating a low-carbohydrate or ketogenic diet. We don't know. He could be somewhere in the middle. He could be eating a standard American diet. We all know how terrible that is for your health. Okay? So again, without any of these biomarkers, of these PILAFs, or knowing the composition of his diet, it's a giant question mark. We just don't know the answer. Okay? So if you saw the blog article and you were able to download the insulin resistance checklist, awesome for you. Okay? In the chat box, Kylie is actually putting the URL of the article. Click on it, you can go to the insulin resistance checklist from there. Put this together, and it's basically, it allows you to print this out and then stick it on your fridge and check off the things that you have accomplished so far. And what you might find over the course of time is that maybe you have 50% of these checked off today, and then 3 months down the road, you have a couple more things checked off. And then a couple more months down the road, you have a couple more of these checked off. The idea here is to have a checkbox in every single one of these. If you can get a checkbox in every single one of these, then you are truly insulin resistant and sensitive. But if not, then that means that there's still a little bit more work to do. So Kylie's going to put this link into the chat box. I think it's already there, but masteringdiabetes.org/insulin resistance checklist. So you can go there and you can download this article, or you can download this checklist. Okay. So here's a perfect example. Tammy. Okay. Tammy, she, in the first 4.5 months of adopting a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, she lost 37 pounds. Okay. Since that time, she's actually gone on to lose a lot more weight. Her fasting blood glucose was close to the type 2 diabetic range. She was actually diagnosed with type 2, but on the day that she was measuring her fasting glucose, it was sort of in the mid 120s. Now it's sub 100 practically every single day. Her A1c has gone into the very low 5s. Again, that's a really good indicator. This is a non-diabetic A1c. Her cholesterol has gone down, her LDL cholesterol has gone down, and she stopped using metformin. This is a perfect example of somebody who has made improvements not only in her A1c, but in a whole bunch of different biomarkers. And unless and until we know how these other biomarkers are changing, we cannot determine whether or not she's actually moving in the right direction. Okay, you can see here earlier she was actually significantly overweight, and by adopting this program, she's now slimmed down tremendously. And like I said, she's lost 37 pounds in the first 4.5 months, but she's gone on to lose a lot more weight since then. And then Sharon's another perfect example. Okay, she's living with type 1 diabetes. Her A1c is now in the close to the non-diabetic range. She lost 25 pounds. She uses 40% less insulin. She was on an oral medication called Simlin. She's no longer on that. She's only on insulin, and her carbohydrate intake is skyrocketed. So these are the types of results that you see over and over and over and over and over again. It's what happened to Robbie. It's what happened to me. It's what's happening to all of our clients, or many of our clients. And this is something that's, this is very real, because this is the power. This is the true power of a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet. Okay, so real quick recap. This is what we've covered so far. Now you guys are experts. You know what your A1c actually represents from a biological perspective. You can now go to someone and explain that your A1C is a 3-month indicator of your blood glucose average because it's measuring the amount of glucose that's attached to hemoglobin that's in circulation, and hemoglobin has a lifespan of approximately 120 days. Okay? You know how your diet affects your A1C level. You know how you can drop your A1C using both a low-fat diet and a low-carbohydrate diet, but that a low-carbohydrate diet makes you more insulin resistant. Okay? Now you know how your exercise regimen you can use that to drop your A1C level simply because you can stimulate both non-insulin dependent glucose uptake and you can gain insulin sensitivity in the resting state. And now you know that your A1C is an incomplete indicator of your diabetes health because just knowing your A1C is not enough information. You have to know the entire acronym PLOF. If you don't know PLOF, you don't know whether you're insulin sensitive. The last thing that we're going to go through here is how to reduce your A1C and gain insulin sensitivity at the same time, because it's possible. I told you that a low carb diet is not going to do that. A low fat diet is going to do that, and Robbie's going to show you exactly how to make that happen.
Okay, so let us know in the chat box. You want to hear exactly how to become insulin sensitive. We're going to review it in this section here. So if we see a bunch of yeses in the chat box, we'll get going. So we've helped over 2,500 people by working with them, coaching them directly on how to do this. And we want to share this information with you. So let us know in the chat box. I see Ann, Linda saying yes. Kim says yes. Connie. We see a lot of questions in the chat box. I know Jose and Kylie have been active. Can't wait to answer those as well. So see a lot of interest here. So let's move on, Cyrus. So we have created the world's first online group coaching program so we can access and help you guys from all over the world. Teaches you how to maximize your insulin sensitivity using low-fat, plant-based, whole food nutrition. All right? So look at the picture on the screen here. This is the type of food we're talking about. It's vibrant, it's colorful. You'll see comfort foods on here, things like potatoes, corn. You see kiwis, mangoes, bananas. There's treats on here, some desserts. You get to have fun. This is a very satisfying dietary approach. And we're going to explain exactly what foods you get to eat to maximize your insulin sensitivity. And we've put this into a very simple, easy to understand, easy to follow, green light, yellow light, red light traffic system. Now, the foods in the green light category are foods you truly get to eat as much as you want to. You can eat them until you are satisfied. Your body will tell you when you've had enough because all the foods in this category are whole foods that are loaded with water and fiber. And those two components together tell your brain that you are satisfied and you don't want food anymore. That's how it works. So we have fruits. These are all the fruits you can think of: bananas, peaches, pears, mangoes, grapes, and yes, grapes when you combine them properly with other foods. Non-starchy vegetables, that's foods like eggplant, cauliflower, zucchini. And the third category here, starchy vegetables. Yes, this includes potatoes, butternut squashes, yams. You get to eat those foods as much as you want when combined properly. Beans, lentils, and peas. That's a very staple of the longest lived people on the planet. It's a big part of this program. Green leafy vegetables. Those are things like arugula, Swiss chard, all the lettuces, different varieties of lettuce. That's on this program. Intact whole grains. Intact is the key word there. Those are whole grains as nature provided without a bunch of processing, okay? Herbs and spices. So those are flavor agents, provide a lot of antioxidants. Those are another way to make your food taste amazing, all right? Now, the yellow light category. These are the foods that can still be part of a healthy program, still part of completely reversing insulin resistance, completely getting off diabetes medications, getting the best A1C ever, just like Tammy, just like Chris and Lindsay and all those, and Sharon. You can still eat these foods, but they're in the yellow light category because you want to be careful with how much of these foods you eat. So we don't want you, if you're watching a movie, you could sit down and you could have a bowl of some fruit and some potato French fries, but you don't want to sit down and just have a big bowl of nuts, okay? Nuts, seeds, avocados, coconuts, olives, these are much higher in fat And like Cyrus said earlier, what causes insulin resistance? Fat stored in tissues that are not designed to store fat. This includes plant-based foods that are high in fat. So that's why these are in the yellow light category. Things like pastas and breads, these are a little bit more processed. So again, still can be part of the program. Something like Ezekiel bread is okay, but it's much more calorie dense. It's going to halt your weight loss versus eating whatever that bread was originally made of, whatever intact whole grain you could enjoy. All right? So now the red light category. These are the foods that we are suggesting you completely avoid. This is dairy products, eggs, red and white meat, all fish, basically all animal products are out. Oils of any kind. These are the most refined foods on the planet. They are not suggested if you want to reverse insulin resistance and maximize insulin sensitivity. Refined sugars, pastries, and breads, these are quite obvious. I think anybody's suggesting that these foods lead to optimal health. So we suggest you avoid them. So that's the simple system. It really, truly is simple. And when you follow this, you get amazing results. And that's what our clients did. You saw in this presentation and thousands of other people getting amazing results. So that's how it works. Now, let's see. Here's pictures of these meals. So when, again, like I was saying on that first slide, when you saw those other colorful photos, this is a diet of abundance, of colorful, vibrant foods that taste amazing, comfort foods. You have a bean dish in the upper corner, a bunch of fruit salad there, a soup. There's a burger made out of whole ingredients there. It's really amazing. You can make potato sandwiches with potatoes as the bread, which is amazing. You can make pizzas. There's so many fun dishes. And as you see, we're very fruit friendly here at Mastering Diabetes. So then you'll see pictures of, there we have it, mangoes, papaya. You see grapes, persimmon, mangoes, kiwis, blueberries, all the fruits that people have been told for so long that they are not able to have because they're living with diabetes. We're telling you the exact opposite. And the success stories you saw are people that have listened to us, followed these guidelines, and reaped the benefits. So that's the program. That is the food. And now how do we help people implement in this program into their life? I'm going to explain that to you right now. We, like I said in that first slide, we developed an online group coaching program that has 3 primary tools. So the first tool we have is we have an online course, okay? This is a robust platform that is designed to make it very simple, just the information you need. So we're going to go into that in detail. Then we have a community. We have a community where you can answer questions, whether that's Facebook or whether that's not using Facebook. We have an online community where you ask questions, we give you answers, and you get support from other people. So the community is a very, very big component of succeeding on this program, especially in the long term. Now, the third tool that we have is we do twice monthly live Q&A calls. And this is an opportunity to see me and Cyrus and our coaching staff, and we interact with you directly. It's a video conference so we can see you. And we're going to go into detail on all 3 of these aspects, but they're all part of the Mastering Diabetes online group coaching program. So like I was saying with the online course, we have put in countless hours to build this course. We've worked with thousands of clients and really dwindled it down to the most important information and laid it out in a step-by-step manner so you get the best results in the shortest amount of time without having to waste your time watching a bunch of videos. That's the magic of this online course and our approach. And it's all done a step-by-step, one change at a time process. We divide it into specific sections, and you get the resources you need as you need them. We start with changing breakfast. We start with setting goals. We master that. Then we move into lunch, move into dinner, move into how to optimize your intermittent fasting, your fitness routine, all these nuanced aspects at the right pace. That's the key. It's always designed to reduce overwhelm and be very clear what step should you take next. What is the action step that you can focus on and not be confused? That's the whole point of our online course. All right. So as you go through that and you start implementing these changes into your life, you will absolutely positively have questions. Cyrus and I, when we made this change, we had a coach. We had a coach who could answer our questions, and it was life-changing, absolutely life-changing to get our questions answered. So what we've designed is a place and a system where you can ask a question and our coaches will respond within 24 hours. We are there with you every step of the way, every day as you go through this transition and questions come up. As often as you need to reach us, we are there for you. Whether you are using Facebook or whether you're not using Facebook. This is an image of what our community forum looks like inside the online course. This is where you can ask a question. Once we reply, you'll get an email notification and you won't miss it. And we're going to help you every step of the way. And you're also going to see other people chiming in, whether it's on this online course here or whether it's in Facebook. Other people are going to share their experience. And that's going to inspire you. You're going to get that support. It's not rainbows and unicorns when you change your lifestyle. Sometimes you want to reach out and share a challenge and talk to other people that have been through that. And that's what you're going to get in the Mastering Diabetes online group coaching program. So another aspect is being surrounded with people who are succeeding, people who are doing it. It's very motivating and highly contagious. When you log into the community forum or Facebook and you see somebody sharing their blood work and their success, it inspires you to keep going, inspires you to optimize your lifestyle and to continue to make improvements so you can get the results you're looking for. These are some of the testimonials you'll see posted. This person up in the upper left there is announcing their A1c dropped dramatically in just 1 month, okay? Then we saw a person up right here losing 45 pounds. An A1c that was originally at 10 is now at 5.3. Again, following these suggestions of eating the green light foods predominantly and getting these amazing results. The system works, okay? We have someone here with an A1c of 5.9 after originally being at 7.2. Big change in 3 months right there. That's terrific. We have more. This is a person living with type 1 diabetes, having an A1c of 6, which is terrific, all right? So these are the types of results we see all the time in our coaching program. All right, now, our third tool here is the live Q&A calls. We love these calls. We use a video conference tool where if you choose to turn on your video camera, we can see you and you can see us. So we get to look each other in the eye and have a conversation, troubleshoot anything that's going on, ask questions about, hey, how can I talk to my doctor? Or how do I overcome this craving? Or I'm traveling, I have an upcoming trip. What suggestions can you make? There's a wide range of questions. Any question can be asked. There's no questions that are off limits. We love hearing from you guys because we want nothing more than to help you succeed and reach your goals. So that's how the live Q&A calls work. We do them twice a month, and they're really, really fun. Now, what does this program cost? Okay, we have all these tools, all these amazing resources. If you put the online course all by itself, that's worth $1,200, okay? Now, if you add in the Facebook group and the community forum on Teachable, where we're going to answer questions within 24 hours every day of the year, that's valued at $1,000, all right? When you add in the new content that we're adding on a regular basis, whether that's a recipe tutorial, a meal planning tutorial, a traveling tutorial, we do live interactions inside the members only group, that's valued at $1,500, okay? Now, if you add in the live Q&A calls, that's $1,200. You add this up, it's going to be very expensive, but the good news is it's going to be nowhere near that for you guys, especially because you are on this webinar. Now, we told you earlier that we had a special announcement, okay? The announcement is that the Mastering Diabetes program has reached capacity. So if you've been on this webinar, if you've heard us talk about the program, we are at capacity and we are now going to close the program and only allow people to join as the rate that we can handle, all right? We want to continue providing excellent service. We want to answer these questions within 24 hours. We want to be able to create challenges, create new recipes. And the way we're going to be able to do that is controlling the growth of the program. So because you guys are on this webinar, you're going to be the first people, you are the first people to know this, all right? And if you want to join us, you still can. So we are announcing that we're going to keep it open until Tuesday. This Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time, that's going to be your last chance to join the coaching program until further notice, okay? The best way to join is for the yearly membership. It's less than 70 cents a day. We'll make sure there's a link, as you can see here in the chat box. Kylie pasted it. That's where you can join. And that's the best way to work with us. So if you've been considering this, you've been thinking about it, if you're inspired by tonight's information, now is the time. Now is the time to join us. You're going to get the best price ever. Our pricing structure will change. So it's not always going to be this expensive. We've started it out at the cheapest rate possible, and we've been excited to be able to serve people at that rate. So if you want to join us, now is the time. So click the link, and we want to work with you. So let us know if you have any questions.
Absolutely. I'm as I was listening to Robbie go through the program, I actually got some chills because it's really cool to be to be the sort of creators of a program that have served so many people and really paved the way to optimal health. And in our coaching program, we have people with prediabetes, with type 2 diabetes, with type 1 diabetes, people who have they've just gotten bypass surgery, people who are trying to lose lots of weight, people who are trying to gain weight. I mean, we see sort of all shapes and sizes. And the overwhelming responses, the overwhelming feedback that we get from people is, this is working, this is working, this is working, this is working, this is working. And, we've tried to put together a program for you that integrates education, support, and community with your ability to interact with coaches. So we've really put together what we believe to be one of the most comprehensive coaching platforms around. And the feedback that we're getting from people is that it works, and it works brilliantly. And so if you're considering, if you've ever been sort of on the fence, or if you're debating whether or not it's the right time, should I do it now? I'm going on vacation. I'm not really sure. Just we're in old. Be able to always work, but the fact of the matter is we're closing and we're hitting capacity, and we may open up at some point, but we're just not sure when that's going to be. So if you're thinking about it, then please, this is your opportunity. Get involved, because that once you get inside, you're going to start to see your entire life transform in front of you. It happened for me. It happened for Robbie. It happens for so many people. This is really this is the time that's. They say there's no time like the present. There's no time better than the present. Now's the time. We want to help you out, so get involved during it.
Absolutely. And it's great to see a lot of people in the chat box, a lot of our members saying, hey, I'm so glad I joined at the cheapest rate it'll ever be. So we're glad you joined too. And everybody on this webinar who hasn't joined, you have that opportunity to come join us. And I saw Richard saying that he's offers resources, looking for resources for diabetic patients. And he's really glad to have found us. So glad you're here with us, Richard. Appreciate you telling your blog about it. So Tracy says, how do I join? So the way to join is there's a link at the top of this box here, of the chat box. And that's the link to go join. If for any reason, we'll send it to you directly. But that's how you join. It's very simple. It takes about 30 seconds to join, and you'll be in immediately. You get to start accessing the material, get going, join the group, and start making changes on your way to your best health ever.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then we can go to some question and answer. I know you guys are asking a ton of questions here, and a lot of them are really, really good. So let's get into them.
Okay, so we'll start with number one from Ava. What happens to the glucose that was attached to the dying hemoglobin?
So this is a phenomenal question. So what Ava's basically saying is, all right, you said that glucose attaches to hemoglobin, and hemoglobin's alive for approximately 120 days. When the hemoglobin dies by another hemoglobin, well, what happens to the glucose? Because glucose is covalently attached to hemoglobin, it's an irreversible linkage, meaning that you can't just go and pull the glucose off of it and say, okay, go recycle this hemoglobin. So I believe what happens to it is that the hemoglobin glucose complex gets degraded, and it gets and you end up peeing it out. So I think it may either get degraded in your liver, or it may get degraded. I think it gets degraded in your liver and then passed to your kidney, and then your kidney passes it. So point being is that both the glucose and the hemoglobin end up going into the trash can or into the toilet. You don't have to worry about either one of them ever again.
Terrific. Okay. All right. So somebody says, speak to the confusion about why the medical providers are telling people to eat a keto diet, high fat diet, and why do people have improved A1c when following that diet?
Okay, so the reason why doctors are quick to prescribe a ketogenic diet, or why people in the world of diabetes are always under the impression that a ketogenic diet is the best solution for their long-term health, is because a ketogenic diet is very effective in the short term. So if you start a ketogenic diet, you can lose tremendous amounts of weight. It's a rapid weight loss tool. Okay, so think of it as basically something that you can use to your advantage to lose weight quickly. So if you lose weight quickly, then what ends up happening is a number of other metabolic improvements, including reduced blood glucose variability, reduced A1c, reduced lipid panel. You can drop your cholesterol, you can drop your LDL, you can drop your blood pressure. And so as a result of this, after adopting a ketogenic diet, usually within the first 3 to 6 months or so, when you return back to the doctor, your doctor's like, are you kidding me? This is fantastic. Everything moved in the right direction. Every single thing moved in the right direction. Who doesn't want to see that? The problem with that improvement, not only is it not going to last forever, but it's actually going to reverse itself over the course of time, because the side effects of the ketogenic diet become more important over the course of time. So in the short term, it acts like a Band-Aid and it makes you believe that your health is improving. But in the long term, it actually becomes a metabolic liability that actually becomes more important than the problem that you were trying to solve in the first place. So ketogenic diets, the short-term results do not equal results. And that's the important thing to understand. A lot of the times in our sort of, in our society today, we're looking at short-term. Make this better now. It gives you medical professionals are so quick to prescribe it.
Perfect. Okay, so we have a question now. What about lectins? Aren't they poisonous? I've heard they are bad for me.
Oh, great question. So yeah, the ketogenic world and the low carbohydrate world loves to pick apart biology without fully understanding it. And they say, oh, lectins are bad for you. Well, lectins are this class of carbohydrate that basically come from, you can find them in all types of foods. Mainly they come from beans and lentils. And as a result of that, the ketogenic community says, don't eat legumes. Don't eat legumes, because we eat them, it causes digestive dysfunction, and that can end up causing inflammation, which then ends up increasing. Lectins, if you eat lectins in a raw state, they can cause gastrointestinal problems. Try eating some raw beans. Try eating some raw lentils, okay? It's not gonna work, okay? It's absolutely not gonna work for you, because those foods were designed to be cooked. When you cook foods that contain lectins, and when you cook them properly for a sufficient period of time, the lectins actually break down and then they become digestible. So if you are worried about eating lectins, the answer is lectins aren't bad for you. Uncooked lectins can actually cause a significant amount of gastrointestinal inflammation. Make sure you cook them properly. Once you do, they're not nutritional. It's not napalm. It's not like you can't eat them. They're actually incredibly beneficial for your metabolic health, and they actually are. They're not considered dangerous or unhealthy by any stretch of the imagination.
Brilliant. I think we can also add how the blue zones have been having beans as a staple for so long. It's a great example of not really something to worry about.
Absolutely. Yeah, 5 blue zones on the planet where the people live the longest, more centenarians in those regions of the planet than any other place. The number one most eaten food in the blue zones is beans. Yep. The number one most eaten food in the blue zones, and the food that is common to every single blue zone where people live the longest, is the food that contains the most lectins. It doesn't add up.
Okay, and that's going to lead us right into our next question. So somebody's asking, why is starch-rich foods okay to eat? And I'll throw in a little bit of information here on that one. Number one, we'll start with what Cyrus just said. These blue zones, they they blocked the beans, but they all ate starch. Okay, so we have a great example there. And the reason why these foods, so we're talking about potatoes, we're talking about yams, butternut squash, those are starchy foods, starchy vegetables, things like rice, okay? These foods, when they're whole, when they're in their whole intact form, they are loaded with fiber and they're loaded with water. And I remember very specifically at our retreat in Costa Rica, Cyrus was giving a presentation and drawing the fiber molecules in a very detailed explanation of how important that aspect is. And that's a primary reason when a whole food is including the starch and the fiber and the water. That's the big deal. So potatoes are different than potato chips, okay? And that's the big deal. So they're low in fat, they're low protein, they're high in carbohydrate, they're loaded with water, loaded with fiber, and they are actually truly the solution to reversing insulin resistance. They're not a problem. Now, sometimes I've seen some comments in here. I know Kylie and Jose have been answering. Some people are, look, I'm doing a keto diet. I'm so confused, and I eat these foods, and my blood glucose spikes. So yes, sometimes in the beginning when you're making the transition, sometimes we limit the quantity of starch. We don't say no starch. We're going to limit the quantity. We're going to add in more things like beans. We're going to add in more starchy vegetables. We're going to construct meals in a way that's going to help you in the process of getting out of that very insulin resistant state. So we get the confusion. We understand where that's coming from. And that's why we designed this coaching program. That's why Cyrus and I are so passionate about working with people on an individual basis and not just writing blog posts and making YouTube videos and ebook and saying, go figure it out. We know there's individual nuances when people are living with diabetes. We know there's a lot of confusion. And that's why we've made this program in a way where you can communicate with us on a day-by-day basis as you're going through these challenges of what happens when you start eating a bunch of potatoes. That's the whole point of the program.
Absolutely. Okay, so here's another question. Adrian says, where's the evidence that people who've been eating a keto-type diet in the long term have become unwell? Phenomenal question. I'm going to share my screen here real quick because what I want to show you is the evidence. Okay, so can you see my screen right now?
It is loading, so we're going to see it momentarily. There we go. Now we can see it. Yes.
Okay, so here's what I'm showing you. If you go to masteringdiabetes.org and then you click on articles right here, or you just go to the search bar and you type in the word ketogenic or ketosis or anything, you'll end up finding this article right here. It's called Ketosis and the Ketogenic Diet, Debunking 7 Misleading Statements. We published this article not too long ago. We have a 20-minute long video that you can watch right here. And then it has this very, very, very long and comprehensive review of what ketogenic diets are and why they are not cracked up to be, why the biology that you believe to be true may not actually be true. So there's 7 statements that we pick apart in this article. And you can go through each statement here and you can really start to gain an appreciation for what the actual biology says. Now, at the very end of this article, you will see that there is a section of references. So you can click on references right here, and please feel free to read every single one of these articles, okay? There's a total of, there's a total of 51 references right here. Because again, everything that we do at Mastering Diabetes is evidence-based. So Adrian or anybody else that's interested in this, if you guys want to read this article, highly recommend it. Watch the video, please. Comment on it, learn from it, and please give us your feedback whenever you get a chance.
Perfect. There you have it. Okay, so Amanda asks, why does my blood sugar skyrocket with any amount of activity and take forever to come down? So I think in this case, we would need a little bit more information here. So Amanda, if you're still with us, let's try and help you out here. What type of diabetes are you living with? That's the first thing we'd like to know here. And we can really give you some specific help and walk through this. There's a lot of factors that could be going on. Okay, so Amanda, we're going to wait for you. And if not, then we'll just go and play through a couple of various scenarios and answer the question. But we'd love to really help you. So tell us what type of diabetes you're living with, and let's go from there. But in the meantime, Cyrus, is there any known connection or interaction between celiac disease and prediabetes?
That's a phenomenal question. Actually, there's a pretty strong connection between celiac disease and type 1 diabetes. There is some research that shows that people who have celiac disease are at a greater risk for the development of type 1 diabetes, and there's some actual molecular mechanisms underlying it, which are evading me at this very moment. However, when the question is there a connection between celiac and prediabetes? And to my understanding, there is not a connection. That doesn't necessarily mean that in your situation, the two of them are unrelated. But if you are celiac, or if you've been diagnosed with celiac and you are confirmed celiac, it's very simple. Just avoid gluten. Avoid gluten-containing products, which mainly come from wheat, barley, rye, and spelt. Okay, you avoid those 4 types of products, or those four foods, and your life becomes super simple. Okay, it turns out that in the Mastering Diabetes program, the lifestyle that we recommend is actually it's very simple to eat that gluten-free, because starchy vegetables are gluten-free, fruits are gluten-free, legumes are gluten-free. The only thing that actually technically contains gluten are the grain, like I said, wheat, barley, spelt, and rye. So if you just eliminate many fruits, vegetables, and legumes, you'll be fine. And chances are, not only will you not experience the symptoms of celiac disease anymore, but you'll reverse prediabetes as well.
Okay, perfect. All right, we got the information we were looking for from Amanda. So now this is making more sense. They said that this person is living with type 1.5. That's what I'm reading here. And so if you're having somebody who's living with insulin-dependent diabetes, and then they go and they exercise, and they see their blood glucose skyrocketing, what is most likely happening is they are in an insulin drought at that point. So they're in a fast-acting insulin drought. They go and exercise, then their blood glucose shoots up. And the simple solution is to make sure you've injected some fast-acting insulin, usually within the past 3 hours. So for me personally, if I wake up in the morning and my blood glucose is perfect, my long-acting insulin worked great, and then I go exercise without injecting any fast-acting insulin or doing any snacking, my blood glucose will skyrocket. Absolutely. And that is because there is no fast-acting insulin in the system working. That's the basic understanding there, and that can be easily fixed. So there's no problem there. And what was the other? It take forever to come down. So yeah, and the reason it takes forever to come down is because at that point, somebody who's insulin dependent has dug themselves a little bit of a hole, and insulin actually doesn't work as well when your blood glucose is very high. So you just have to be patient. But again, they can learn to solve that problem and not have to deal with it anymore. So that's a simple answer there. All right. Cyrus, can anemia affect A1c?
Anemia affect your A1c? I think the reason that question is being asked is because anemia is an iron deficiency. An iron deficiency, iron is at the center of hemoglobin, so people who are anemic tend to have less hemoglobin. As a result of having less hemoglobin, does that mean that you have a lower A1c? I don't know the answer to that question. I think the answer is no, that just because you're anemic doesn't necessarily mean that your A1c is going to be directly affected. But I will also be the first person to say I don't fully know the answer to that question. So let me maybe do some reading about that. And I can get back to you. But it's actually a really good question.
Perfect. Okay. So the two other things I want to just touch on here real quick. So in Amanda, somebody like Amanda's case, she's asking, hey, did you see my answer? So hopefully you heard us answer the question. You said thank you, so that's good. One of the key components you saw when we were going through the course as it was laid out in a step-by-step manner is we have a thing we call the decision tree, a tool we call the decision tree. And this is where you document your day-to-day diabetes decisions. It's very simple, easy to fill out. It's just logging what happened on a factual basis as time goes by throughout the day. And you take a picture of that and you post it inside our Teachable course, if you don't use Facebook, or you post it on Facebook. Our coaches are going to look at it, and we can really get into the nitty-gritty and help you solve any blood glucose questions you have. Why was I high here? Why was I low there? Why did this meal result in that amount of insulin sensitivity? Or if you're living with type 2, I don't use insulin, but why is my blood glucose high here and low there? Like, we're going to help you solve that problem on an individual basis through our coaching program and you filling out decision trees. So somebody like Amanda, we can really get to the nuances and completely solve any given problem through the program. Okay? And there was one other person that asked about, can we eat meat on the program? So one thing Cyrus and I like to remind you guys is We are not the food police. We're not here to tell you you can't do this, you can't do that. You're wrong, you're bad, you're wrong, you have to do this. That's not what we're doing. Our program is designed to be 100% plant-based for optimal results. That's what we teach. That's that's the direction we're heading. If you choose based on your goals and your desires, hey, I need to have a little bit of this, I need to have a little bit of that. Don't not change. Okay. Don't not get started, eat more and more plant-based. Don't be like, oh, I just can't do it. I can't do it. That's not the case. I can tell you, I mean, just being honest on a factual basis, nothing to do with environment or ethics or anything. There's plenty of clients that we've worked with. They choose to include a little bit of the animal products. And they still got amazing results. Like they're still feeling good. Let's just be real. Let's look at the science in a real way. The peer-reviewed studies of all these societies, whether it's Okinawa, whether it's centenarians in China or the blue zones or whatever, did they have small amounts of animal products and still live a long life and not end up with lots of diabetes and be very insulin sensitive? The answer is yes. So we're here to work with you and teach you the consequences of your decisions. That's the point. So you get to own that. Like we opened up this webinar saying how proud and confident Cyrus and I feel of being in full control of our diabetes health. We're going to give that to you as well. And you get to decide what actions you want to take. Is totally up to you. So that's what our program is designed for. All right. Let's see. I think we got all the questions, Cyrus.
Okay, so Kylie says that Amanda responded. Okay, so here we go. Endocrinologist says that I'm type 1.5. I'm still producing a very tiny amount of insulin. Okay. So this question is, why does my blood sugar skyrocket with any amount of activity that I take? Okay, so Robbie talked about the insulin drought. That could be part of the problem. So if your endocrinologist says that you're type 1.5, okay, what type of diet are you eating right now, Amanda? Are you eating a low carbohydrate diet, a low fat diet? Is there some element of insulin resistance at play here? Second, also, another question is, are you taking insulin currently? Because if you are taking insulin, one of the things that we see in our program often is that people come into our program with like a insulin pump that has, too many basal settings on it, or their carbohydrate to insulin ratio is not dialed in properly. So you're giving yourself insulin, but it's kind of a crapshoot. You don't know if you're giving yourself the right amount of insulin. Maybe it's too much, maybe it's too little. And as a result of that, your blood glucose is doing this thing all day long. So what we can help you do is refine your insulin dosing technique. I'm not a doctor, Robbie's not a doctor. We can't tell you what to do, but we can give you some strategies that will help you understand how much insulin to give yourself and when to give yourself that insulin. Because when you do it using the right amount of insulin, both basal and bolus, and at the right times, then your blood glucose is rock solid stable. But if either the amount of insulin, the type of insulin, or the timing of your insulin is off, then it's really hard to sort of understand exactly how to control your blood glucose, because it seems like it's this problem that you can never solve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. I think we got to all the questions. I mean, there's one new question, Ralph asking, what do you do if your body shakes of hunger? I mean, this is something where, again, we would love to work with you. I mean, the price we have this program at, it's incredibly affordable. But the bottom line is we want to see what you're eating. There could be food sensitivity. Sometimes we walk people through the process of simplifying their diet and slowly adding foods back. There could be the concept of calorie density. Maybe you're not eating enough food. You think you're eating a lot, you're feeling full, but you're not actually eating enough calories to meet your caloric needs. Sometimes, we have experimented with some people using a plant-based protein powder, hemp protein powder, sometimes helping people in between meals with hunger and satiety. There's a lot of things that we can try when we go into details of what you're actually doing and see pictures of what you're eating, see decision trees, see your medications. That's what our program is designed for.
Absolutely. So for the 417 of you guys still remaining, on your screen right now, you should see a box that has popped up. If you're considering joining the Mastering Diabetes Coaching Program, obviously Robbie and I are huge advocates of it. It works like wildfire. What I'd recommend doing is clicking on that button that says join for $249 a year. You can save 30%. It gets you into the program for 70 cents a day. We're literally providing you with the most quality coaching program for diabetes in the plant-based world that exists. You're not going to find something that's more comprehensive than what we've developed. If you do, please let us know, because we don't know that it exists. But point being is that for 70 cents a day, which is less than, a glass of tea at your local Starbucks, it's like, we're providing you with an opportunity to get your diabetes health, to maximize it. And in most situations with pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes, you can kiss it goodbye. You literally kiss it goodbye, and it'll be done with. It'll be a thing of the past. And we want nothing more than to be able to help you out. We are changing the structure of our coaching program. We're changing the pricing, and we literally be closing the coaching program on Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. So please don't delay. If you've been thinking about it, now's the time to join. Highly recommend getting involved. It's worth every penny, and we'd love to see you on the inside.
Absolutely. All right. I got nothing else to say. That's it. That's perfect, Cyrus. Appreciate everybody being here. It was great attendance tonight, great participation. I hope you guys learned a lot, enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the inside.
We'll see you inside. Thanks, guys.